Hello, and welcome. Today I'm going to be explaining science fiction and its prominent relations with anime. Now, you might have heard about anime. I wouldn't be in doubt. You might have heard from a friend, might have seen a clip, maybe on Instagram or YouTube, or possibly you might have even seen an anime before, which I wouldn't be surprised. But if you haven't, that's all right, because in this presentation, I'm going to be explaining the origins, the different types of genres, and most importantly, how science fiction relates to anime and how it can't live without it anymore. Now let's dive into some common genres that can be found within anime. Before I explain science fiction and its relations to anime as a whole, I want you to at least grasp the concept of some genres that are associated with the animation style, which is essentially what anime is. So, first off, we have Shonen, which is a genre aimed at usually young males around our age of 14, 15, 16, and so on, teenage years usually, or younger. And these types of animes are usually very action filled. There's a lot of maybe fighting, a lot of story, and that usually appeals to that audience. There's also adventure, a genre usually has characters, they go on a voyage or a quest, or it could be one protagonist, and they're usually searching for maybe a MacGuffin, or it could be a land, a purpose, or even just a truth of some sorts. And along with that, there's also slice of life, a very popular one. And it doesn't really follow a mission or a goal. It's more of just a part of, as it says, someone's life. Some more genres within anime include mecha, which is a genre that usually includes essentially big robots fighting each other, or fighting aliens, fighting monsters. It's essentially bigger than life creations that usually resemble a human, but are robotic in form. Along with that, there's isekai, which is a genre that refers to a sort of fantasy world, with characters usually experiencing mystical magic properties, or things that wouldn't be stated as natural. And of course, there is comedy, also very popular. The genre is usually mixed with adventure, and it's almost a subgenre of that kind, but it's so prominent that it's good to mention. So some examples of these include, for adventure, a good one is One Piece. A slice of life could be Saikike, and very prominent, probably the most popular comedy is One Punch. So let's first start off with One Piece by Aikiro Oda. So One Piece follows this man named Monkey D. Luffy. He has almost rubber-like properties, which is a power he goes on to possess, and it follows him on his story of adventure. He has two goals in mind. The first is to become the king of the pirates, and another is to find this great treasure called the One Piece, hence the title of the show. Along the way, he meets up with other pirates. He forms a crew, and essentially, he becomes more powerful, more strong, and he learns along the way. A prominent theme throughout One Piece is following your dreams. Monkey, throughout the entire show, essentially, he tries to find the One Piece, and that's his main goal. And another theme is the power of friendship. The only reason he's able to achieve the great treasure and find it is due to his crew that he made along the way. A prominent slice of life anime is Saikike by Shuichi Aso. So, Saikike is, since it's a slice of life, it doesn't essentially have a goal in mind. It more so follows the story of this man named Saiki. He's a high school student who's born with psychic powers. And essentially, the show follows him and his everyday life as he interacts with classmates and teachers and his family. And overall, it's mostly to poke fun at him, since he is psychic. Normal situations that you and me would have no problem with, he has to deal with because he needs to hide his special powers, which makes for a fun journey. And of course, there's One Punch Man. One Punch Man follows a man named Saitama, who is a superhero. In this world, a lot of humanity has possessed superpowers, and so most of these use it for good, to protect people. Although, of course, there's common villains. But One Punch Man, his power is, as his name suggests, he defeats anything with one punch. This includes meteorites, which he saved the world from, aliens and monsters, which he defeats in battle. And overall, this power is very useful. He befriends a cyborg named Genos, along with some other friends throughout the way. And the entire show, he's called a fake, and he is shamed by society for a power that he possesses, as no one believes him. But it's good to remind yourself that this is a comedy, and although the theme seems kind of grim, it's overall made with the intention for you to laugh. Now I'm going to explain science fiction and its inclusion into anime, which is very prominent. So first off, anime has almost always included some element of science fiction, even from the beginning. Considered the first anime, or at least popularized to be the first one, Astro Boy is science fiction in nature. It follows the story of a young boy who was in a fatal accident, or nearly fatal. His father, who was a scientist, rebuilds him as an android or cyborg, and this is very science fiction in nature. A common theme of sci-fi includes robots and machines, which is what Astro Boy essentially is. Now, although I stated earlier that it was the most popularized first anime throughout Japan, it wasn't essentially the beginning. There was one before it, which was dubbed The Dull Sword. And this one was not as influential, but it's still very important to consider as it was the beginning of this entire franchise. The story itself follows a small samurai who tries to buy a sword, but as the name suggests, it is dull and he loses in combat. Now I'm going to explain some sci-fi animes. All three of these are very prominent and very well known among Japan, the United States, and even Europe. Now I'm going to cover Cowboy Bebop by Hajime Yatsute. So, Cowboy Bebop takes place in a world where humanity has conquered the solar system, or, it appears that way. The story, the point of view, is from a man named Spike Spiegel, who has essentially lost hope for his future, and he can't escape his troubled past. So, he decides to turn and become a bounty hunter. He is called a cowboy, and for context for the title, his ship is called the Bebop, and he travels from planet to planet looking for fugitives. So throughout the story, he meets some other cowboys, and essentially he learns to confront his past and to accept the future and the world as it is. Back to sci-fi, however, the story with its the use of fast space travel and interplanetary connections is a very common trope in sci-fi, which is included in Cowboy Bebop. Another very popular show to explain would be My Hero Academia. This show takes place in a world where almost the entire population of humanity possesses superpowers, except for the main character, the protagonist, whose name is Izuku. So Izuku is born without them, but he encounters his lifelong hero, who then passes his powers onto Izuku. Throughout the story, he joins a high school, and he essentially tries to follow his dream to become the #1 superhero in the world. And the main element of science fiction is the powers which each character has. For example, one Shoto Todoroki, his power alternates between ice and fire, and how he's able to use this is by controlling the heat around him to essentially create long beams of ice or create instantaneous fire. And finally, there's The Promised Neverland by Caiushirai. The story follows 3 gifted kids that are born in an orphanage, or that's how it appears at least. The science fiction element in the story is a dystopia. As it turns out, the children are not born in an orphanage on Earth, they're born in a demon realm, and their main purpose in life is to be livestock as they are fed to demons. So, of course, the main story of the show follows their escape plan as they try to lead all the children away and break out to go back home. The dystopian world is a great trait in sci-fi, and although it's included in many other animes, The Promised Neverland is the most prominent example. Now, I just want to recap here that science fiction, even though I named only 3 animes as examples, it's found in almost every anime nowadays. Of course, there's other genres like I mentioned. Isekai is fantasy and also almost as prominent, but the themes in science fiction are so wide and different that they are perfectly incorporated into almost every show. Sci-fi has no doubt planted itself into almost all animes. Now, no matter what anime you watch, you'll always find some sort of element of sci-fi. Even One Piece, which I mentioned earlier as an adventure, even though it includes pirates, it also includes things like robots, which is a great sci-fi theme and element, It's become such a massive genre nowadays, not just science fiction and anime, but anime as a whole, that it can't really live without it anymore. And overall, anime is such a vast category that nowadays almost every single element of science fiction can be found within one, from parallel universes to robots to even space operas. The genre is essentially endless, and this science fiction incorporation will essentially stick around for the long term, possibly forever, until science fiction dies out, which it most likely never will. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.